It's time for the Postmortem Report.
With your hosts, Ronald McGilray and Michael Schotter. Each month, these sultans of speculative fiction take a break from bending reality to ask one burning question. What cool stuff got buried in the social media graveyard while people were busy yelling at each other? Well, there's only one way to find out. So let's dig into it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Postmortem Report. I'm your co-host, Michael Schotter.
And I'm Ronald McGilvery. Welcome to episode 4.
Or as I like to call it, the Terror Dome.
There you go.
How you doing, sir?
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
It was a good week.
Yeah.
Got over my COVID. A bit of a hoarse throat, because I think everything's that was kind of running through me is drying up, but feeling much better than I was.
Yeah, you're looking very chipper, so that's good. That's a good sign.
Yeah. Not dozing off with my medicines. So yeah, it's onwards and upwards.
Excellent. Back in the saddle, as it were.
That's it.
Beautiful. Okay. Well, I hate to do it because I know we've kind of developing a bit of a reputation here for starting the show off on a little bit of a down note. But before we get into our birthdays and whatnot this time around, there are a couple of sad things we need to talk about.
It's becoming a bit of a normalcy almost now. It's every month.
I think we maybe should have a new directive that people just aren't allowed to pass away anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're bringing us down.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we should start on it.
Yeah. I do think there are a couple here that we definitely should acknowledge. So
two big ones.
Yeah.
Our condolences, of course, to Peter Straub. He passed away in September. His daughter Emma did a nice tribute. Did you see that?
Yeah, I definitely wanted to call that out. I thought that was a really good, kind of well put together Twitter thread that she did, especially given the circumstances, right? Like, I can't even imagine what it would be like to be in that situation where it's like, you know, your parent has just passed away and you feel compelled to, you know, address it on social media, right?
Yeah.
like I think that's a very unique situation that sort of the kids and relatives of famous people have to deal with. That never really occurred to me too much until I started seeing these kind of posts showing up in recent years. But you know, this particular thread I thought was really, really well done, where she just kind of, you know, showed some different pictures of her dad in various circumstances and kind of commented on, you know, why he was great and her kind of feelings about the whole situation, you know, like I say, within days of it actually occurring. So I just kind of wanted to shout that out and kind of give it a nod in case people hadn't seen it, because I know especially on Twitter, things go by so fast, and you know, if you blink, you'll miss it sometimes. But I feel like there was a lot of traffic around this particular event just because, you know, he was such a big name in the literary world that
was an icon
it drew a lot of attention.
Genre.
Yeah, for sure.
It was a touching tribute. I mean, the Ghost Story was a big thing for me. You know, it was I love not only the book but the movie adaptation. It was. I'm sure it had a big impact on a lot of people. So,
well, I know I had read the Talisman back in the day. That was my sort of first and only exposure to his writing thus far. But Black House has been on my TBR basically forever. And I think, you know, sadly, another sort of consequence of things like this happening is that'll probably end up pushing that up on my TBR a bit, which is, you know, sad but true. I'll probably end up getting around to that one sooner than I might have otherwise, just out of a desire to kind of, make that a priority.
Right.
But
sad news.
yeah,
But,
for sure.
Our condolences to Peter Straub and his family.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Thank you for many good years of writing.
Indeed. So one more we got to get through, and this is another one that I think ended up affecting a lot of people.
Well, I mean, for us, Canada being part of the Commonwealth, Queen Elizabeth passed away on September 8th. It's very divided, I see, on social media. A lot of people have strong views on the monarchy. But
for sure.
I mean, it's not a big play. I mean, we have the Governor General, so there's very strong ties with Canada. But it's just something that was in our schools and everything. So it was, although not a day-to-day thing for us, it's always in the back of the mind. Kind of a shock, when sort of like Peter Straub, like an icon, somebody that's always been in the background, passes. It's kind of shakes your thing.
Well, you had mentioned it to me, and it hadn't even occurred to me until you brought it up that, like, the Queen was literally on your money.
Yeah.
So that was something that hadn't even occurred to me. I'm like, oh yeah, it's kind of wild to think about.
You go out to your Instabank, and when those 20s pop out, there's her face smiling at you. Although I'm not really sure if she was smiling or not, but it's her. So it's it's a bit wild. I mean, it's been on the news every day since it's happened. It's a big piece of news. Just in 70 years. I mean, it's quite a legacy she left behind.
Yeah, no doubt.
So those are the only two we have for you this month. So
yes,
both are doozies.
Fortunately, that is the case. But like I said, maybe we'll have to put a moratorium on moratoriums. I don't even know how that works.
Yeah. We'll do a post. No more deaths.
Yeah.
Because everyone's checking us out, so they're going to see it.
Mm-hmm.
I know the Royals follow us.
I'm certain that's the case.
Yeah. So shall we get into birthdays?
Yeah, let's shall. By all means, bring us into the happy place.
There we go. Well, Gareth Powell turned 52 on September 3rd. The author of the Embers of War series and Late Chaser with Peter F. Hamilton. I believe you're actually a much bigger fan and a lot more knowledgeable on him than I am.
Yeah, well, Gareth is a really interesting fella because he's sort of one of those. I wouldn't necessarily call him an indie success story, but he's definitely done a lot to kind of promote indie talent, especially like within the sci-fi genre. And he's definitely one of those people who's kind of used his fame as he's become, a bigger and bigger name in the science fiction world to kind of help promote other authors in various ways, similarly to how he was helped, in the early stages of his career, I'd say. So I definitely always think it's cool to kind of give him a little bit of a shout out whenever possible. And obviously, folks who are familiar with his work will know that he's, a pretty big name in the sort of subgenre of science fiction, affectionately referred to as space opera. A lot of your big, like, sort of intergalactic, giant space battle, type stuff kind of falls into his wheelhouse. Which makes a lot of sense too, given the association with Hamilton and the sort of their collaboration. So, yeah, mostly just wanted to give a little shout out there, kind of say, and I know he made that post on Twitter about, like, this is what 52 looks like. I think you're looking good, my man. I think you're good. Yeah.
So happy birthday to Gareth.
Yep.
If you're watching, and if not, how come?
Nice.
Another birthday, Wayne Fenlon, author of Scattered Little Pieces.
Yeah, so this was an interesting one, I thought, because you had talked recently about the idea of wanting to get more into flash fiction. And so when
Yeah,
I saw this one pop up, I was like, oh, here's a potential opportunity. Uh, and I actually ended up reading a little sample from this one
mhm,
and reading like the first few pieces from it because the whole gimmick of this book is that all the stories are basically 100 words.
right.
Uh, so real super ultra compact, basically like no more than like a scene or a few lines of dialogue or whatever. And I definitely enjoyed several of the ones that I read. I'd say like if you have any interest in flash fiction, if that's something that you're kind of keen on or wanting to explore, there's some interesting ideas even in that little sample. If you go onto Amazon and check that bit out. Um, it kind of reminded me the thought that I had as I was reading it is it kind of reminded me of like when I had like a Far Side calendar back in the day, and you'd have those little like one cell Far Side comics where it's basically like bam, here's your little zinger for the day.
Yeah.
Uh, that was kind of the vibe I got from it. Uh, but yeah, thought it was
It was
pretty cool.
interesting because I know when we talked about flash fiction, and then I saw his book that I picked it up right away because I started reading some of them because I'm always fascinated because my stories tend to go on a bit. I can never sort of encapsulate because it's no easy feat pulling off
Hmm.
something that's like 100 words. So kudos to Wayne and a big happy birthday. Actually, this is a side note. He does book cover animations as well. He's done animations for both of my books, and you should check out some of that stuff if you're watching. Go check out Wayne Fenlon. See his book animations. They're pretty cool.
Nice. Well, happy birthday indeed, because I think he just sold 2 books.
There you go.
Yeah.
Another birthday, Brian Barry. His birthday was September 7th, author of Ogre and Bloodbath. So happy birthday Barry, to Brian. Um, John Durgin. His birthday was September 10th, author of The Cursed Among Us. Happy birthday to John. Uh, it's a busy September. Brian Smith, his birthday was September 13th, author of Consuming Darkness. Jeremy Robert Johnson, his birthday September 21st, author of The Loop. Mary from Book Nook, her birthday was September 26th. She just did a review that I read the other day of The Exorcist House by Nick Roberts. And
Nice.
yeah,
I think I saw that pop up, but I haven't had a chance to check it out yet.
yeah, she does a lot of great book reviews, and is there for the writing community. So happy birthday, Mary. Michael Tyree, September 30th, author of The Pale Horse. Um, Happy birthday to Michael. Glenn Rolfe, September 30th. He actually, the post that we have for him shows his some of his upcoming 2022 releases. So check that out. He's also one of them. It came from the lake by Crystal Lake Publishing. So definitely check that out. Happy birthday, Glenn. Um, and here's one that's a big one too. Piers Anthony turned 88 in August.
Yeah,
Uh,
I definitely have some things to say about this one because
I figure
we
it's right up your genre.
yeah, well we talked in a recent episode about one of your sort of literary heroes, Joe Lansdale,
Mhm.
and I would say probably in a similar fashion, I was pretty heavily influenced and impacted by reading Piers Anthony's stuff back in the day. Uh, he's probably most famously known for his Xanth novels and for doing the novelization of the Total Recall movie, the Schwarzenegger movie from back in the
Right.
day. But actually, the two series of his that I really ended up connecting with and getting into were the Adept series and Incarnations of Immortality, which I think are two really, really solid, really, really well executed fantasy slash sci-fi series that I would definitely like highly recommend to anybody who hasn't had a chance to check either of those out. But yeah, it's really cool to see him kind of still at it and out there. You know, he's still got his website going, and he's doing like monthly updates. You know, getting his first smartphone at 88. How about that? I hope I'm still operating at that level if I make it to that age myself. Yeah.
I'm not as knowledgeable on his work as you are. I did read On a Pale Horse, which is a really great book. I guess that's part of the Immortality series.
Yeah, that is book one in Incarnations, which I can kind of sort of very, very quickly sum up the concept of that series is basically that there are people who manifest and represent different pillars of existence. So in the case of On a Pale Horse, you have a person who's literally embodying the role of death. And then I believe the second book in that series, Bearing an Hourglass, is somebody literally embodying the role of time and all of the sort of consequences and mechanics and ideas that would be associated with that is kind of the gist of that series.
It's a really cool idea.
Yeah, that's the thing about those two series. I think that they both similarly take a concept that on the surface seems very kind of almost simple and like, oh, why didn't I think of that? And kind of run with it in some very interesting and novel and like creative ways that I think are I think those are fairly widely known and widely read series, especially within like the fantasy and sci-fi reading communities. But with both of them kind of aged or having aged a certain point by now, I think there's like a whole new generation or generations of readers that have probably never been exposed to those books because they the last one in each series was published decades ago at this point. But yeah,
well, I know I enjoyed On a Pale Horse. Not sure why I didn't read the series, but then again, I've never all been really huge into series. I tend to get like something and then I want to jump into something new, and it's really hard for me to follow the series. But that was a really good one. I'll have to take a look at it to go back one day.
Nice.
So happy birthday to Piers.
Indeed. Well, I feel like after all of that, we might need a little bit of a break. Perhaps a bathroom break.
All right, I'm going.
Drank a lot of water. I really have to go. People are waiting to tee off. There's no restroom out here.
Has this happened to you? I've got the perfect gift. Introducing the Uroclub, the discreet sanitary solution for your urgent relief. It looks like an ordinary golf club, but contains a reservoir built into the grip to relieve yourself. The Uroclub comes with a towel and appears that you are just checking out your club. Leak-proof, easy to clean, and no embarrassing moments. Order now. The Uroclub, the only club in your bag guaranteed to keep you out of the woods.
So are you feeling nice and relieved and rested and relaxed?
Absolutely. Best tip I ever had. Great commercial.
Yeah, nice. I think now we might have the strength and the presence of mind to continue on with some more book related stuff. And actually, now that we're thoroughly prepared, we might want to explore some physical activities, such as what you just experienced in a book that you recently read.
Well, I just read Parachute by Holly Ray Garcia, and it's something else. At first, I'd never even heard of this parachute game, which I understand now is quite prevalent in schools. I missed out, apparently. but the book itself, right from the beginning, I really loved the writing style. It had a really great flow to it. I started getting engaged with the characters, and then this parachute game. It's a novella, so I don't want to say too much, because when a shorter piece like that, you say too much, you basically ruin the story. But it's basically, if you're familiar with the parachute game, you have, imagine the parachute, a brightly colored parachute, and group of kids would lift it up and let it come down over them. And I guess they giggle and laugh at each other and whatever. But that does not happen here. There's no giggling and laughing. When they go up and come bring it down, they somehow magically transport somewhere. And these places aren't any places that you'd want to go. So I'll leave it at that. But it's a really cool story. There's so many things I'd want to say, but I was about to say one thing, and I thought, no, that I'd let readers find out on their own. But yep, just, it's like, imagine being in bed and throwing the sheet over your head, and when you pull that sheet back,
as a consequence.
it's just, it's not saving you from the boogeyman. Don't put that sheet over your head. So yeah, it's a really great read if you're looking for something new to read before bed, and you want something short, novella style. Check it out. Parachute by Holly Ray Garcia. Thumbs up.
Excellent. Yeah, I think you've done a good job of pitching that and making me curious about it without giving away too much. TBR, why are you so big?
Yeah, I know.
It's okay. It's okay.
You can never have enough books.
That is true.
My second one was actually an audio book. I saw actually a post by Bev Vincent, and it had to do with Mile 81 by Stephen King. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, God, it's been so long since I read it. And I've been trying to get more into audiobooks, because I've always had a problem with audiobooks, because I'll start watch or listening to it, and then I find my mind wanders. So I'm trying to teach myself to focus in on it. So I've been practicing with sort of shorter stories, podcasts that have shorter stories. But when Bev had mentioned Mile 81 by Stephen King, I thought, I'll give it a try. So I listened to it, and it was just as good as I remembered it. King loves vehicles that kill. And this is no different. He seems to have a real love for that sort of sub genre, killer vehicles.
Yeah. He's kind of got it on lockdown too.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to even think about going there without worrying about drawing comparisons.
Yeah, exactly. And this one's cool. I mean, it's got it's at an abandoned rest stop. There's a malevolent vehicle. Once again, I'm sure most people who are watching this show probably have already read it. I mean, most are Stephen King fans, but if you haven't, I won't get too much into it. Just needless to say, an abandoned rest stop is cool enough. A malevolent vehicle, and the unfortunates that happen to pull up into that rest stop.
Nice. I mean, obviously,
and there's children involved. Another King trope. So it's
we're just checking all the boxes, aren't we, Stephen?
Yeah. So I really liked the Mile 81. It really brought me back to what King does best, and it was a great audiobook. So check it out.
Yeah. I was going to say that's reminding me of one of my more recent King audiobook experiences, which was Everything's Eventual, which is sort of a similar kind of collection, right? That you have. I believe Mile 81 is from Bizarre Bad Dreams, which I actually have not read, so
Okay.
I'm not familiar with that particular tale. But talking about audiobooks, because with Everything's Eventual, that was one where I had started reading it,
Hmm.
the hardcover, I believe, and then I ended up somebody had gotten it for me on audiobook as a gift, so I ended
Yeah.
up rereading the first couple of stories that I'd already read by hand, and then finishing it out on audio. And so that was kind of an interesting experience, right? Because I distinctly remember reading that first story from that book, Autopsy Room 4,
Okay.
and actually physically reading it, and then very, very soon after hearing it read to me in audio. And so I got that very like direct comparison, between those two different experiences. And it was really interesting, like the things that I noticed when I was reading it versus what I noticed when it was being read to me. And a part of that, of course, could have come from the fact that I was experiencing it for the second time. So I was
Yeah.
noticing details and stuff that I might have glossed over, during my initial read. But yeah, that was one of those rare experiences where I had that direct comparison to make, and I couldn't help coming away from that feeling like, oh yeah, it is kind of a different experience reading it versus having it read to you, even more so than I might have initially sort of considered until that happened.
Well, the story can change too, because depending on the reader, what the beats, the nuances that he emphasizes can change, a story too, or make you look at it a different way.
Mm-hmm. For sure, for sure.
Because well, my wife showed me how to sign up for the library to get audiobooks from the library. So that's how I've been honing my audio book listening skills. So it's very handy. Although there's a lot of books when you first look at them, there's like waiting lists, but
Mm-hmm.
you find one that you can bide the time while you're on the waiting list for the one you really want. But yeah, I
Nice.
mean, just this library thing, it was the greatest. And I just check it out, and it doesn't cost you a cent.
Excellent. Good tip for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Get
Uh,
your
another
library
one
cards.
Another one that I think is worth throwing out there too is if you're an Amazon Prime subscriber, I believe there's a certain selection of audiobooks that are also available through that kind of rotate in and out
Yeah.
as part of like the whole Prime reading thing that they do. So that's another potential source for that kind of stuff. In addition to the ebooks, the Kindle edition books that they also have as part of that. So
So
another
many
thing to
options.
consider. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, no shortage of stuff to read for
Yeah.
sure. But it's funny because we've mentioned King a few times in previous episodes, but I think this is the first time we've ever really delved into any particular, in-depth analysis of any of his stuff, despite probably him being my most read author, I would say by a
Yeah.
pretty wide margin. Yeah, it's kind of funny that that's the first time we ever seriously talked about his stuff in detail.
I'm
I'm
sure
sure
there'll
that
be
will happen
many more to
again.
come. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's such a
Wide selection
yeah,
to choose from.
cornucopia of
Yeah.
stuff to delve into there.
Yeah.
But cool. Well, speaking of Mr. King, I think you saw something recently that's sort of related to him.
Yes, I just finished watching the miniseries Chapelwaite. It's a great series, sort of based very, very loosely on sort of Jerusalem's Lot.
Hmm.
Um, it's sort of, I guess, it would be a prequel to Jerusalem's Lot and Salem's Lot. It kind of
Mm-hmm.
gives you the idea where the vampires sort of came from. I guess that's not really a spoiler. If it is, if you haven't read either of them, there's vampires, but that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
really ruin the story. But
Way to go, Ron.
Yeah, yeah. All those people who had it on cue to watch or listen or read. But yeah, it's a really really good series. I highly recommend it. As I said, it sort of, if you're a fan of Jerusalem's Lot and Salem's Lot, sort of shows how it all sort of began in that part of the world. If you like sort of vampires, this is probably your cup of tea.
Yeah, nice. That was one that had totally flown under the radar for me. I had no idea that it even existed until I saw you post about it, and I was like, "Oh, interesting, very interesting."
Yeah, no, it's really. I mean, it's beautifully shot. It was shot in Canada. It has a lot of Canadian actors in it as well, which is actually funny because some of the major players are from comedies. From another Canadian show, Schitt's Creek. Don't know
Mm-hmm.
if we're going to get in trouble for saying that word. Um, the
The spelling is key, censors. The
Yes,
spelling is key.
yes, exactly. And the other one was from Corner Gas, which was another really funny Canadian show. But they've moved into horror now, and they did a really good job. But
Nice.
yeah, it's very very atmospheric. Um, Once again, it's a miniseries, so can't really say too much without spoiling anything. But if you're a fan, as I said, of Jerusalem's Lot or Salem's Lot, you basically know what to expect.
Yeah,
So if you haven't watched it, Chapelwaite, great series.
excellent. Well, speaking of crossing the streams as far as genres are concerned, I have actually been watching something recently, which I just finished a few days ago, which is season 3 of the Orville, which was on Hulu because they sort of moved over to that platform for this latest season of that show.
Right.
And I know you have started to watch it, or at least watched some of it, and I suspect that you might have some similar issues with the initial episodes of that show to what I had.
Yeah, well, here in Canada, we see it on watch on Disney. That's where it is, and I gave it a shout, or gave it a try, and I'm not really huge on humor. I mean, some of it's funny. I don't know. It's just not my go-to thing, and most of my humor that I like is a bit darker. I mean, this one has good. It's good fun. It's campy humor. Um, I
Yeah, so
I don't know. It was okay. It's just not my cup of tea, so to speak.
mhm. Well, and I think that's totally fair, and actually, it's kind of ironic because I feel similarly about especially the first several episodes of season 1 of that show. I almost feel like it's a bit of a shame that they felt compelled to chase the humor and the gags out of the gate with that show, because I really don't think that that's its strength.
Yeah,
And I think that's something they actually figured out pretty quickly as they got deeper into it, because I think it was around episode 4 or 5 in season 1 where it kind of starts to take a turn and the humor really starts to take a back seat to some of the more interesting, like sociological and thought-provoking and sort of character driven stuff that ends up becoming more prominent as the series goes on. But I can kind of see why they did what they did with it, because obviously with Seth MacFarlane at the helm and sort of his reputation and like the work that he had done that preceded that show.
right.
Um, I feel like that was kind of a thing where they thought, well, this is something we should be doing, and this should be like a major component of the show. But
Yeah,
I'm really glad they had the sort of uh, insight and the ability to kind of pause and take a step back and realize, hey, wait, this is not actually what's the most important thing about what's going on in this show. I think another reason why it kind of struggled in the beginning, because I think they were really trying to use the humor to try to differentiate it from its obvious inspiration, which I would say is definitely Star Trek: The Next Generation and like the later Trek series, right? Like I think you could very easily make a compelling argument to say that show is almost like a reimagining or a reinterpretation of like, late 80s, early 90s Star Trek in a lot of ways. And I think it's no surprise why that gets called Seth Trek, in certain circles, because especially as the series goes on, it really does lean even harder into that sort of Star Trek-ish vibe and like way of approaching things, and a lot of the topics it addresses and a lot of the concepts that it delves into become very, very, very reminiscent of like a lot of the more classic interesting Star Trek episodes.
Maybe I should continue on, maybe, because as I said, I've only got like 4 or 5 in, and I just found it was like, all right, well, he's staying in his comfort level. He's doing these kind of Seth MacFarlane gags, and it was kind of, but the thing was, it wasn't like super funny. It was just kind of campy humor. It felt like they didn't know what they were. It was like he did a bit of humor, but then kind of pulled back, and it was kind of, I was kind of like, yeah, it was just okay. Well, if you want to kill half an hour, that's what it was. I mean, because some of the story ideas were kind of good, but the storylines, just some of it just kind of, it would be like, because obviously it was done on commercial or something, because it kind of goes into the scene and then it kind of cuts as black and then it starts again. So I was like, oh, I guess it was on a commercial based.
It started out on Fox.
Oh, okay.
That was the original network that it was on, which made sense because at the time, he's doing Family Guy and American Dad and Cleveland Show and all those other things there. So I'm sure that was just part of his arrangement with them to get that greenlit and off the ground. And I think that probably had a lot to do with the initial tone, of those initial episodes too, right? Like it was probably them wanting him to bring those elements, or at least as much of those elements from those other shows, which had been successful for them, into that. And like I said before, I think that was much to the detriment of the show in the beginning. But fortunately, like I said, I think they did a really good job of righting the ship at a certain point.
Right.
But it kind of makes me think about a couple of different things. One of which being, we talk about the slow burn a lot when it comes to consuming media, right? Where it's like something that captivates you and grabs you and knocks your socks off right out of the gate, versus something that you kind of have to, get through a little bit of a process to kind of get to where it eventually ends up being good. And I think that's actually, ironically, another area where the Orville and Next Generation have a lot in common, because I think if you objectively look at that first season of Star Trek: The Next Generation, especially compared to what came after it, it's not that great. And I know I might take some heat for saying that, but there was a time, we look at Next Generation now as being like this quintessential sort of standard bearer of the science fiction genre, but for that first season, it was very much debatable as to whether or not that show was actually going to work and take off and kind of become, what it obviously ended up becoming. And I kind of feel similarly. Now, I think that the difference with the Orville is they kind of shot themselves in the foot a bit with trying to shoehorn the comedy stuff into it, which I don't think Next Generation did anything that egregious in its first season. But it does remind me of the fact that like we're kind of in an era now where if a show or anything really isn't like immediately successful or doesn't knock it out of the park, right out of the gate,
Yeah.
there's a tendency to kind of want to just dismiss it or sweep it under the rug or forget about it or whatever. It almost feels to me like there's not as much patience for things as there used to be in a lot of regards. And I think you see that reflected in like the way a lot of shows kind of fly under the radar when they first air these days and only kind of get discovered if they happen to survive those first, 2 or 3 seasons to the point where enough people have watched them to actually have fully formed opinions about them and that sort of thing. And I think it's not even really like a thing that's limited to television, right? Yeah, like where I see it all the time is in like the video game industry, right? Where you have, situations with like the new Tomb Raider games that came out like recently, where the company that published them considered them failures because they only sold 3 or 4 million copies instead of 7 or 8, stuff like that.
Well, greed is alive and well in the world today. Is there another season?
So New Horizons may end up being the last season, depending on how things go. I think a season 4 is still a potential possibility. Kind of where they left things off, you could end it there. You like the way that 3rd season ends, you could consider that an ending, and I think they did that on purpose, so as not to leave people hanging. But you could definitely continue, from the point where they left things. There's definitely some unfinished plot threads and some things that aren't explicitly addressed and could be followed up on in a subsequent season for sure. But you brought up greed, and I think that's another interesting irony of the whole thing, and I think it speaks to both the Orville and Trek, right, portraying these sort of utopian future societies that aren't based around money or capitalism or any of the like the traditional hallmarks of like the world as we know it today. And it's ironic how these shows because I would argue that modern Trek has suffered from this as well, with the whole situation of like the new Trek shows being behind a paywall, for a lot of people. These ideals or these idealistic premises and these ideals kind of being manipulated and otherwise like subverted by, the demands of, greed, basically. It's kind of
Star Trek.
Kind of an
Next
irony.
Generation, there was like pre-Beard Riker and post-Beard Riker.
Mm-hmm.
And that's once he learned to grow that facial hair, the series
was a game changer.
Yeah, it was
a game changer for sure.
So
nice.
So but maybe I'll give the Orville a try. Well, it's not like I was going to stop every so often. Like it's good to have a half-hour show in your lineup, because every so often you're just like, I just feel like watching something light. Because they got into that one with I can't think of the character. The one it was an all-male species.
Bortus.
Yeah, Bortus.
Yeah.
Because that got into some actually pretty heavy issues.
Yeah. So, and that to me is sort of the first sign of that kind of creeping into things, right? And that sort of continues more and more as you get deeper into it. There's some real, I think one of the greatest things about sci-fi as a genre is its ability to sort of be thought-provoking and to like incite, internal or external debate around various issues and sort of societal woes and struggles and whatnot. And I think that's something Trek obviously has done well for a long time. But I think similarly, as the Orville goes on, it does a pretty good job of addressing a lot of those sorts of things in a similar fashion. And that's definitely one of the reasons I would recommend it, because that show is not always on fire, but when it does fire on all cylinders and when everything kind of comes together in it the way that I think they intended it to, there's some really good stuff in there that I think is worth experiencing. That'd probably be the last thing that I'd say about that one.
Yeah, well, comedy too also turns its eye on social issues, because a lot of comedy they use satire and sarcasm to sort of poke fun at certain issues. So, I mean, Seth MacFarlane has, it was more the juvenile yuck humor at the beginning, but he probably could hone if he had certain things he wanted to talk about. It's
Yeah, because I mean, he certainly has the potential to do that. I mean, he's proven that he in various efforts, he's proven that he has the ability to attain that level of sophistication in his humor. I think that's the sort of bummer about the humor in the initial parts of the Orville is that it does seem kind of like low hanging fruit, right? Is it kind of like, I don't know, punching down or not really like, given it his A game there for whatever reason. But maybe he wanted the jokes to bomb so that he could get to doing the serious stuff. You never know.
Never know. Well, if you don't think that the Orville's right for you, remember the Chapelwaite is a really good series.
Nice. So, bringing it back around. Nice.
There you go. The callback.
Yeah.
Seth MacFarlane using humor.
Mm-hmm.
So
nice.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of MacFarlane, one thing that he's sort of infamous for, especially from the Family Guy stuff, is the non-sequitur, right? Just sort of injecting the random thing in. And that's another thing the internet is good for. And I think it's time to talk about a little thing that I've seen popping up here and there on Twitter for the past few months. And I was pleasantly surprised to find that you had come across as well, which are these funny / quirky images of Leatherface being injected into random black and white pictures. You want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, it's Donnie Goodman posts these his daily Leatherface pics, and he has it. He's going to continue on for so many days, and I don't even remember what his last number was. He's in the hundreds. Days that he's been doing it consecutively, and they're all really funny. And I really should learn to do Photoshop and stuff, because I mean, some of this stuff you can do. Like I was looking at how you can superimpose things, and his stuff is kind of funny. Oh God, what's the movie from? It's that we have for this picture. The movie. Oh, I can't even think of it now. It has John Cusack in it.
Say Anything.
Say Anything. I mean, I've commented a few times to stuff because they're really funny, but that one was just like, it was such a big movie back in the day, and when I saw it, it was like just a wash of memories came back. And but yeah, Donnie Goodman does a great job. But as a shout out, not only does he do that, but he's a good writer. He has the Razor Blades in My Head. Shout out for that. But he also has the upcoming Strange Weeds charity anthology coming out as well. So just in case people just saw those, the Leatherface posts, he's actually check out his writing as well. But yeah, there's something to look forward to every day. When I'm scrolling through to see, what's Donnie Goodman posted.
Yeah. Well, I like how he sets up the whole premise in this post that like he's just going to do it until he forgets.
Yeah.
But I would think at a certain point after you've done a few hundred of them, the chances of you forgetting to do it are going exponentially down. So I'll be curious to see how long he wants to keep that up. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure, because it really, I mean, when you think of daily, you're trying to think, what am I going to, what to post? Or, I mean, for him to come up with something, original, it's can't be easy. So, I mean, he gave himself the out because he jokingly said, "Oh, until I forget." But now that he's got sort of probably a following just with that, now, that sort of that ripcord he had, it's a bit tougher because you could say that, but now you're like, "Oh, I've got so many people following. Can I really just drop it?" Or, "Oops, I forgot."
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see. But good job, Donnie. Always entertaining. Look forward to watching them every day.
Yeah, those are fun for sure.
Yeah. Wish I had to come up with it. Damn you, Donnie Goodman.
Nice. Well, speaking of having fun tinkering with things, I came across a little something on YouTube recently that I think is going to lead us into our first serious music discussion.
Oh, we're moving into music.
Indeed. So, this video, which is called The History and Mystery of Yes's Leave It, is from a relatively small but pretty cool YouTube channel called Music Video Time.
Mm-hmm.
And he did this about half-hour long sort of mini documentary thing about, unsurprisingly, the music video for the Yes song Leave It, which many people may or may not know was the second single from probably arguably Yes's most popular album, 90125, which of course had Owner of a Lonely Heart, arguably their most popular and well-known single on it.
I think it was their only one hit #1, wasn't it?
I believe that is correct. I'm not entirely certain about that. I'm not sure how they charted back in the day with things like from the Yes album and Fragile.
I'm pretty sure they never hit one.
Yeah,
they were a pretty esoteric band, popular, but not a Billboard #1 thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that one was. They waited till the '80s to make it.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that this got me thinking about was all of the personnel shuffles that they had up to that point, right? Because when you look at the sort of diagram of all of the people who've been in and out of that band in its various incarnations over the years, that is quite the shuffle.
Yeah. Well, they had some amazing players.
Mm-hmm.
So it was quite the band.
Yep. So talking about this video for a minute, did you get a chance to check out any of that?
Yeah, it was actually pretty interesting. I mean, it triggered a lot of memories because I remember back in the day with their whole promo was, we've got so many, videos. I think it was like 18 of them. I didn't actually remember there was that many, but I remember it was several, and there was like a gimmick to it. Like if you watched it, if you saw all of them, you could get something. I mean, it was a long time ago, but watching the video and they were talking about it, it brought back a lot of memories. But I certainly didn't remember 18 videos of that.
Yeah, I definitely remembered this happening back in the day. I definitely remembered seeing some of these versions of this video on MTV live, back in the 80s, because that was like sort of prime time for me to be like fully engaged in MTV, at that age and at that time. And I don't think I'm almost certain I didn't see all of the different versions of it, but I do remember seeing at least a few of them and thinking, man, this is a crazy video.
Yeah.
Some of them were like downright almost like avant-garde and experimental in like the way you would probably expect from a band like Yes. And it was funny watching the video that this YouTuber had put together, because he really dug around and found like as much like old archival, like behind the scenes footage and stuff like that as he could to like integrate that into his video. And hearing like the different band members talking about it and kind of their takes on it, and like seeing the whole idea that like the prize, so they basically had a contest, which was if you could identify all the differences in all the different versions of the videos, you would get a video cassette that included all 18 versions. Which is kind of crazy, because the whole thing now is everybody's trying to track down all of those versions, because only a handful of them are currently available online or on DVDs or whatever. And it's kind of wild that the prize for that contest, if somebody had actually, won it, would solve that problem. But the super crazy irony to it is apparently the videotape that you would have gotten if you had won that contest was a Sony Betamax. So it's not even a VHS tape. So I just imagine there's somewhere someone has an old Sony Betamax tape that has all 18 versions of that video on it in a shoebox or a closet somewhere, and it's just gonna end up in a landfill or like discovered and like held up like some kind of treasure of YouTube at some point.
Yeah. Well, one of the interesting things too in the video was the whole sort of looking at Godley and Cream, which they were producers and musicians in their own right, and because I remember their song "Cry."
Yeah, that Cry video was everywhere back in the day.
So big. I mean, I look at it now and it's like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like faces morphing, but back then it was like, my God, what can they do now? It's just incredible. But
well, I know they did Herbie Hancock's video for Rocket too, which was another like mainstay of MTV back in the day. Yeah.
So yeah, there was a lot of facets actually to that the video. It was a good video.
Yeah, I definitely subscribed to that channel and have checked out some of his other stuff too. It's always amazing to me the finds you can come across on YouTube, right? Like channels that have, dozens or more videos on them that maybe only have I think this guy's only currently got like 1,000 subscribers or so at the time of recording this. But I know that Yes video is already up over like 100,000 views. So I suspect that might be changing for him shortly.
Yeah. Well, it's those people we talked about in a previous episode about, the people who have the ability or are fanatical enough to really deep dive into stuff. What was it? It was a mafia one we were talking about. Was it?
Yeah, that Center Ranter channel. Yeah, about the Peter Clemenza stuff. Yeah.
Just look at the one thing and just so much work goes into like searching out this information. So, I mean, kudos to them.
Yep. Yeah, you should totally go watch that episode too if you haven't seen it.
Yeah. Calling back to previous episodes.
Yeah, plug. You never want to miss an opportunity to throw a plug in, right?
Exactly.
But
are you a fan of Yes?
Well, I was going to say, getting back to Yes, though, that is a band. I wouldn't say that they're like among my top bands, but I definitely have an appreciation and an affinity for a lot of their music. I have several of their albums, like obviously the Yes album and Fragile and 90125. And actually, I was going to mention, and I thought this would be a fun thing to do since I know you have a sort of more obscure Yes album that you're a fan of. I thought it might be fun to throw out our favorite obscure Yes albums. So I will start with mine.
Sure.
Because I know it's different from yours, which would be somewhat controversial, I'm sure. But I am actually a really big fan of one of their last albums, which is Union from 1991, which was sort of like when they reformed in their second reformation, where like a lot of the original members kind of came back for like one last go around. And there are several songs on that album that I think are like criminally underrated. And obviously, like, you had Lift Me Up on that album, which was kind of a minor radio hit, but in my mind should have been a much bigger hit than it actually was, because I think that song is excellent.
Well, it's a fine album, but it's no drama.
Yeah. Come at me, bro. I'll fight you.
I love that album, Drama. I Am a Camera. When you hear the words, you try to describe it to someone, they just kind of look at you. You have to listen to it. But I love that song. I just love the whole opening sort of. I was just about to actually make the sounds.
Oh, do it! Come on, the people want to hear it.
Not gonna
the people want to hear it.
Anyways, whatever. It was a very good song. I don't know what it is about it. Just totally captivated me. But I like the whole album, Drama. I mean, I
Well,
like Fragile's big album for me as well. But
mhm.
but I mean, 90125 I like, but it was mostly because they played it at bars and stuff that I went. But it was never an album that I like sat down and listened to. But Fragile, Drama, I listened to it all the time.
Mhm.
Because a lot of their albums, there were good songs, and there were just some that were pretentious, for
Mhm.
I guess lack of a better
Little
word.
little
But
overblown, maybe.
yeah, but now
Yeah.
with playlists, you just go yes, playlist, and just you get sort of the best ones. Plus, the obscure ones come on at the bottom. But
Mhm.
it's but yeah, they're when you get all the best from each album together, it's a sizable greatest hits package.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And even if you explore like a lot of those deep cuts, that weren't anywhere close to hits per se.
Yeah.
There's definitely a lot of good material there that's probably gone unnoticed by a lot of casual fans, I would say. But it's funny because after you mentioned being a fan of Drama, I actually went back and listened to it probably for the first time. I don't even want to think about how many years it's been since I had heard that album. And when I got to the Through the Lens song,
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I remember this. I can see why he's into this one for sure. I'd actually say that was probably my favorite from that one on a re-listen as well. Uh,
The
so
vocals are really
yeah,
strong on it too.
yeah, yeah,
So
for sure. Well, and I mean, obviously, John Anderson, probably one of the premier, you know, rock
vocalists. Yeah.
vocalists of all time, easily, I'd say, for sure, no doubt there.
Yeah. Well, it's
But
it's hard for the newer bands because when you get so many years, that's what you were saying earlier. It's that it's got to be now. So these
mhm,
they have musicians now don't have really a chance to mature, and it's
into
all
to
controlled
that
by the
level, yeah,
producers. Yeah.
yep, exactly, yeah.
But
Man, we're just all about the callbacks this episode. We're just
yes,
setting them up and bringing them back. It's like we're fishing.
exactly.
Yeah,
So all you kids, check out Yes.
yeah, for sure,
They'll better your life.
indeed. I would not debate that even a little bit.
What a
Uh,
fine band to start our new music
segment,
segment. Yes, there we go.
indeed. Well, I think that's the last thing I would say about this is this will certainly not be the last time we will talk about music, and I'm sure we will have many more bands and or music related things to discuss in future episodes. So look forward to that.
Stay tuned.
All right. Well, having said all of that, I think it's time for another one of our favorite recurring topics, which is video games.
All righty.
So, what do you got for us this time, Mr. McGilvray?
For me, this month it's Silent Hill, a classic horror adventure survival game.
Mm-hmm.
When the first one came out, I once again, like Resident, I'd never seen anything like it. Like the fog and how the street just kind of ended, and it was just like this abyss out there, and then having to figure out where you were and the creatures that you were up against. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I guess it was mostly and the creepy like the sirens that went off. It was the whole package. I
Very
mean,
atmospheric.
yeah, the storyline itself and like the ending and stuff. A lot of people, I mean, it's very controversial. People either loved it or hated it, but it was at the time it was something else. It was just sitting there in your with all the lights off playing at night, going street to street, and the weird fog, and then when the sirens or bells went off, and there was all of a sudden the scenario changed, from where you were to whatever. I mean, you're in a restaurant and the radio's crackling and you're with like messages, and it was like you could really immerse yourself into it, kind of thing. Like
For
the
sure.
first one, he was looking for his daughter, which of course was a great hook, because everyone's protective of their children, so he's looking for his daughter. So it was a really strong motivation to keep going. The second one, I liked it as well. He was looking for his wife. The other ones, I don't know. I never. It wasn't the same magic, except for four. Um, Four was called The Room. I don't know if you're familiar with that one, where this guy's in an apartment and I can't remember if he goes to sleep or he passes out, but anyways, he wakes up and the inside of his apartment door, there's just like chains all over the front of it. Like he's locked into his apartment, and a hole kind of starts to form, and he can see into another room, and he can see out the peephole of his door, and all sorts of strange things are going on in each one. Eventually, he manages to find a portal to get out of his room to go to different places, and looking out the windows too. I remember that was always go into like the bedroom and look out the window at like the real world, or what you think is a real world, and that really was totally different than the other earlier ones. But the number four was actually, other than sort of the atmosphere of one, four is my favorite. I just thought the whole concept was really cool. Being trapped in the mystery of like what happened and like what's real and what's not real. And it was it was a good franchise. Unfortunately, they didn't come across well when they tried to do the movies like Resident Evil.
Yeah, well, I will refrain from dunking on it too hard, but I will say this, that that Silent Hill movie is probably one of my most hated films that I've ever seen. It's as
Well, don't
close as
dump on
I've
it too much.
it's as close as I've ever come to actually walking out of a theater, which is ironic because actually the director of that movie directed a film that I liked quite a bit called Brotherhood of the Wolf, which I think is a little underappreciated and underrated. But that Silent Hill movie was definitely not a favorite of mine. But I will also say I was never really all that experienced with the games and that stuff either. Like I'd probably played a little bit of each of them, and I definitely like have pretty strong recollections of like running in terror from Pyramid Head at some point. I think like Pyramid Head is sort of like a great iconic baddie from that series that I definitely remember having some run-ins with. But that's for me, Resident Evil was definitely the survival horror series that I had more exposure to and more like sort of familiarity and affinity toward. Not that I ever really had anything against Silent Hill. It was just that it wasn't where my time ended up getting spent. But I definitely always appreciated, the things you'd mentioned, like the atmosphere and the sound design and the environmental work and stuff like that. Like those games always had a great feel to them and a great presence to them that I think is very iconic for sure.
Yeah. Well, for a game that you're playing almost like you're a character, but you basically put yourself in that character's place. So it's you walking the streets, when you're walking around a corner, they made it so it's like really just creeps you out almost the entire time. So they did a really good job. I didn't mind the movie as much as you did. I mean, I didn't think it was great, but I didn't actually mind it. But I guess because I had more of a love for Silent Hill, the game itself. So, but it was
I think for me the kind of tipping point with the movie and I guess we'll apply our typical spoiler rule here, because I mean, really old movie at this point. So
Yeah.
if you haven't seen it, sorry. But
Or put pause right now.
yeah. Brief little spoiler here for the Silent Hill movie. But when the cop ends up getting killed in like that really just ferociously brutal manner, and it's just like this really gut punching moment. And from that point forward, it takes this just really bleak, dark, fatalistic, just awful turn that for me just felt really like nihilistic and just cynical and just unsatisfying in a way that I really felt like was like super, super off-putting. But having said that, I do recall, especially for like the first parts of that movie, thinking, oh, they did a really good job of capturing the atmosphere and like the feel and the vibe from the games, right? So that is something that I will say positively about it, despite having many issues with what came later. So I can at least give it that much for sure.
Well, I guess for me too. I mean, being more from the horror genre, none of that really phases me. It's like, bring on the intense gore and sadness, and it was, but yeah, it was a good series. It was a good series until 4. As I said, I haven't really gone any further after that, so I don't. I can't say much, but
well, it's interesting. I don't know if you're familiar with PT, which was that demo that Hideo Kojima did with Norman Reedus, which was sort of like a low-key Silent Hill reboot that got done. There was like actually a thing where like people were keeping PS4s that had that demo installed on it and selling them on eBay for like hundreds of or thousands of dollars, because at a certain point the demo went away and the game got canceled. And so like that little demo is literally the only remnant of that project that exists. And there's kind of been like this subtle outcry in like the gaming universe from a lot of people who played that or saw it or like saw the potential in that premise or that project, that are like still kind of pining for it even to this day. And I think there might actually be, I've heard some rumors and some rumblings from various places that project might actually kind of reincarnate in a new fashion now that Kojima's kind of off doing his own thing since leaving Konami. So it'd be interesting to see. And I think actually I'll have to dig this up and see if I can verify it. And if I can, I'll throw it up on the screen. But I think Norman Reedus might have let it slip recently that he was working on something to do with that. Because him and Kojima worked together on Death Stranding, which I don't know if you ever played that game.
No.
But if you haven't, it is quite excellent. I'll throw that out there as a little mini recommendation. Kind of bridging the gap between your game pick and mine. Which
I just actually remembered. Sorry, I was going to say Silent Hill 2 had Sean Bean in it. It just occurred to me that from if you're Game of Thrones fans, they're
did they kill him real good? I can't remember.
Well, no one fares very well in Silent Hill.
Yeah, but I mean, Sean Bean is kind of notorious for taking dirt naps in films, right?
Yeah. So it's all this time we were talking about it, and I didn't even remember he was in it, and then just I don't know, something you said triggered. I thought Sean Bean's in that movie, so there you go.
It was probably the Norman Reedus thing, because then you probably started thinking about like who are actors who've been in the series. Yeah.
So what do you have for us this month?
Well, kind of keeping with with the TV shows, we kind of did horror and sci-fi, right? And now with the games, we're kind of doing horror and sci-fi, because I'm going to talk about a game called Pulsar Lost Colony, which if you are a fan of things like the Orville and Star Trek and the whole like people on a spaceship going around exploring the galaxy and stuff, I think this game might be something you want to check out. So basically, it is a 1 to 5 player cooperative focused space exploration game where you're sort of tasked with taking this spaceship and going out into the universe, galaxy, and exploring to try to find this colony that's been lost for ages, that has sort of like the key to the salvation of your race and or the galaxy at large, supposedly. And basically you go around, jumping from star system to star system, doing away missions where you go down to space stations or planets or whatever, and there's sort of little plot threads and missions to explore and NPCs to interact with and whatnot. You can get into some fights. You can go just exploring and find various items and sort of secrets and stuff like that, and basically do a bunch of missions, earning reputation with various factions and whatnot. And the other thing that's kind of interesting about it is that you can actually pick which faction you want to play as. So there's sort of like the human type race. There's more alien type races that you can play as. And of course, each of them have like their own different ships that have like pros and cons and strengths and weaknesses to them. Right. And it's basically like that Star Trek nerd wish fulfillment simulator, I guess is how I would describe it.
Well, it looked interesting. I mean, I saw it when you posted it up and I was checking it out, and I thought, I mean, I like especially when you go onto the bridge, because I remember like way back in the day, Atari had this like Star Trek game. I mean, and all it was like these square pixels were just like coming at you, and I thought that was fascinating. You're like in the screen, but yeah, I saw that and I was going, it'd be kind of cool, captain your own ship and stuff. Because you'd mentioned that if you're playing alone, you can get AI to do different things, correct?
Yeah, basically any of the roles you don't want to do. So there's basically like the captain's role. There's the pilot, engineer, tactical officer, and scientist are basically the 5 roles. And I think when you're playing by yourself, you might have to play as the captain, who can do any of the roles, and then you can assign AIs to all the other ones. So they'll, you basically pull up the map and say where you want to go, and the AI pilot will fly the ship there. If there's enemies wherever you end up going and you need to fight, then the AI tactical officer can do the fighting for you. Or, you can jump in and do it yourself. But they give you enough assistance with the AI that if you don't have friends to play with, online or whatnot, the AI is fairly competent. It can get the job done in most situations, with you maybe only occasionally having to jump in and do something, a little more critical or a little more vital from time to time.
That would seem cool to me, just to be the captain, ordering people to do stuff. Just that you're sitting there and the battle's going, put up shields, shoot the torpedoes, get us out of here, just to be able to make a command and have your people doing it, and just thinking of it just from a tactical standpoint without having to worry about doing this and doing that, and just and then seeing if your actual captain skills is any good, because once you're surrounded by the enemy and blown up, you go, all right, not a good idea. Let's try it again.
Is this a Kobayashi Maru situation?
Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the one. Well, we were already talking about it. The one thing when I saw it, it looked like it had a quite a steep learning curve. That was the only thing that kind of put me off a bit.
Yeah, there definitely is a bit of a learning curve, especially if you want to play certain roles, right? Like the engineer has a lot to do because, you've got, all the controls and stuff on the bridge to take care of. And then there's the whole engineering section where like, if you literally like run down into the bottom of the ship, there's, all the stuff going on in engineering that you have to kind of take care of and manage. But actually they do a really excellent job with their tutorial in that game. because basically you literally go to like Starfleet Academy. Basically, when you fire up the tutorial, they take you through all these scenarios and kind of teach you in a controlled environment how to do everything, right? So that by the time you're done doing that, which might take you, a couple hours to go through literally everything that they have on offer there, it gives you an idea of which role you might actually want to play as, right? So you get to experience each of the roles individually and kind of figure out, okay, what's my play style? Like, what am I best suited to actually do?
Right.
And then gives you also an idea of what the capabilities of the ship and the different crew members are, so that if you are playing as the captain, you kind of know what you've got at your disposal, right, to make stuff happen. So that stuff is all super well done. So I definitely have to give a tip of the hat to them for that, because I think I think it's fine for a game to be complex, but a big part of that is whether or not that complexity is efficiently and effectively conveyed to the player. So I think like having a good tutorial like that is kind of vital to the game being successful, right? And I think that's an area where they really get bonus points for having put all the work into that they did, because it makes it a much more pleasant experience to kind of ease your way into the game. It's not like you're just being thrown into the deep end, in shark infested waters.
Yeah, the graphics were really good too. I mean, I saw only a limited bit of it, but from what I saw, it was pretty high production values.
Yeah, I mean, they get a lot of mileage out of their art style, because I wouldn't say that the graphics are particularly like highly detailed or anything crazy like that, but they have like a real good, well-defined art style that's got like a pleasant look to it, and everything looks real consistent, and everything's real easy to kind of pick out and spot. Because that's another thing that's kind of key, right? Is when you're on the ship working the controls and stuff, you kind of need everything to be very effectively communicated visually, because when all hell's breaking loose and like the shields are failing and the warp core is about to breach and the lasers are overheating or whatever, you need to be able to see what's going on all those panels at a glance. And they did a really good job of keeping like the interface real nice and clean and high contrast, so that everything kind of pops visually, and you're able to get like a real good sense, even in a real crazy situation, of what's going on. And I think that's another thing, kind of speaking to the whole like Star Trek nerd wish fulfillment aspect of it. It's right. If you ever wanted to be on the Enterprise, like working the controls and doing the stuff, like that game does a really good job of kind of capturing the essence of that. Like, I know there are other games and actual like legit Star Trek games that have done that. Like, I know there's like Star Trek Bridge Crew and things like that. But I think the one thing that I would say that Pulsar kind of has over the Star Trek games that I've seen, at least, is that it is a little more open-ended. Whereas like a lot of the Star Trek games I've seen are a little more structured and a little more focused. I don't think I've really seen a Star Trek game that's as open-ended and like just dynamic in terms of like what can happen and the way that you choose to do things as Pulsar is. So I'd say maybe if you're comparing, this Pulsar game to any of those other Star Trek games, that's one differentiating factor that I feel like it has, is that ability to just start off the game and pick a direction and go, in this vast galaxy of possibilities, and just get the experience of feeling like you're actually going out and exploring something, and you're making all the choices about what you do in what order and all that sort of thing. It's kind of a fun, cool experience, especially if you get to do it with other people. If you're fortunate enough to have friends who will let you boss them around as captain.
Yeah. No, it looked cool. I mean, who hasn't? Well, I mean, obviously, if you're not a genre fan, but I was like, who hasn't really fantasized of being, in control of the bridge of a starship?
Yeah. And there's definitely some other games that have done that, but I feel like, especially This one in particular, I think, is one that's kind of flown under the radar for a lot of people, and I think a lot of people aren't necessarily aware of it, which is definitely one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it here, because I feel like it hasn't really been getting its due for whatever reason, probably money.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't even heard of it actually until you'd mentioned it and brought it up.
Yeah.
So,
Nice.
good pick.
Excellent. Well, I think we've managed to complete our own 5-year mission, which after the birthday segment, it kind of seemed like it might be a 5-year mission. I don't know.
Yeah.
But here we are again at the end of another one of these. Congratulations, Captain.
Thank you. Number one.
Uh-huh. I set myself up for that. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to, but I couldn't resist. I mean, it was just wide open there.
Yeah, I walked right into that. All right. Well,
thank you for watching, everyone. If you're still here listening to us.
Hopefully it was engaging. That was bad.
It definitely was.
I should probably stop talking now. All right. Well, we will see you all next time, which will actually be our final episode for 2022. How crazy is that?
Time flies and you're having fun.
Indeed.
Congratulations. You just survived the post-mortem report. For more information about the show, the hosts, or the things they talked about, check out our super swanky information page at anchor.fm/postmortemreport. Until next time, always remember, good posts never die.